She was sold to a cattle baron, but escaped into the arms of a quiet drifter. Dust rose in the yard as the wagon rattled away, leaving Clara May standing in the heat, her small hands trembling against the coarse fabric of her dress. She had always known her uncle was hard, but she had never thought he would sell her. Not truly. Not to a man like Baron Whitfield. The cattle baron's bulk filled the porch of his ranch house, his shadow long as if even the sun bent away from him. "Your debt's paid," her uncle spat, swinging up onto his horse without meeting her eyes. "Best make yourself useful, girl." Clara's throat burned. "Uncle, please!" But the horse's hooves struck the dust, carrying him back toward town, and with him went the last blood tie she had. The only family she had left was her little brother Samuel, left behind at the boarding house. She had begged her uncle not to take her away from the boy. She had begged. The ache of leaving Samuel gnawed her chest, worse than hunger. He was just 8, all ribs and big eyes, clutching her skirts when they'd parted. She had whispered she would come back for him, but her uncle's hand had dragged her away. Baron Whitfield's voice broke the silence like a whip. "You'll find the kitchen that way. Meals on time, clothes mended, and no back talk. Do your work and you'll have no trouble." His pale eyes scanned her like she was a heifer up for branding. Clara's chin lifted, though her knees shook. "And if I don't?" His smile was slow, dangerous. "Then you'll learn what happens to those who forget their place." She swallowed hard, forcing her fear down deep. She had no power here, none but the promise in her own heart, a promise that she would not be broken, that she would not forget Samuel waiting for her return. That night, she lay in a narrow cot under the eaves of the ranch house, listening to the creak of boards and the moan of prairie wind. Her hands bled from scrubbing, her back ached from carrying water, but it was the silence that hurt most. Samuel's absence pressed against her chest until she thought it might crush her. She stared at the sliver of moon through the window and whispered, "I'll come back for you, Sam. I'll come back." The words were frail, but they were all she had. Like seeds dropped into dry earth, they were a beginning. Someday, she swore, those seeds would grow. Morning on the Whitfield ranch came with the sound of cattle bawling and men's boots striking the packed earth. Clara rose before dawn, tying her hair back with trembling fingers, every movement heavy with dread. The Baron had rules, all spoken, with that flat tone that told her he'd tolerate no questions. The kitchen fire had to be lit by first light. Meals had to be hearty enough for a dozen ranch hands, beds made crisp, laundry scrubbed until her hands split. She worked in silence, but silence didn't spare her from his presence. Whitfield often stood in the doorway, arms folded, hat shadowing his eyes, watching her. She never knew if it was to catch her failings or to remind her she belonged to him now. At dinner that first week, he tugged her close before the men. "See this girl? She's mine. Paid for fair and square." His grip on her arm was iron, fingers biting into her skin until her teeth clenched against the pain. The men chuckled uneasily, but no one spoke. In their eyes she saw pity, but not enough to risk crossing him. Nights were worst. She barred her door with the chair, though she knew it would not hold if he truly meant to enter. Each creak of the house set her heart racing. Sometimes she thought of running straight out into the prairie, but fear of the endless miles, the rattlesnakes and coyotes, kept her rooted. She told herself she had to survive long enough to find a way back to Samuel. That was the only rope she had left to hold. Still, in quiet moments, Clara found sparks of herself that the Baron couldn't touch. She hummed old lullabies while kneading bread, the same ones she used to sing to Samuel. She stitched a patch of blue thread into the hem of her dress, a color Sam had loved. Tiny rebellions, hidden from Whitfield's eye, but they gave her breath, when despair threatened to choke her. Once, as she fetched water from the well, a ranch hand named Henry muttered, Keep your head down, miss. Ain't no one crosses the barren and stays breathing long. His voice was low, his eyes flicking nervously toward the big house. Clara dipped her bucket and answered just as low. I've got someone waiting. I can't stay here forever. Henry's gaze softened, almost kind. Then pray for a miracle. That night, Clara pressed her palms together and prayed under her breath until sleep took her. She prayed for Samuel, for freedom, for any kind of mercy. She did not yet know that mercy sometimes wore the face of a stranger, arriving when least expected. The stranger rode in on a dun-colored horse one late afternoon, the sky behind him streaked with orange and violet. Clara saw him from the kitchen window first, a lean figure moving with quiet ease, not swagger like the cowhands, nor dominance like the Baron. His hat was tipped low, dust clinging to his coat, but his presence was steady, like a river cutting through stone. Whitfield greeted him with suspicion. We don't hire drifters without knowing where they've been. The man dismounted slow, his voice calm. Name's Eli Turner. I've worked stock all the way from Abilene to Dodge. Heard you could use hands for the drive. The Baron studied him a long moment, then spat into the dirt. Work hard, keep your mouth shut, and maybe you'll earn your supper. That evening, Eli joined the other men at the long table. Clara brought bread and stew, moving careful under the Baron's watchful eyes. When Eli's bowl brushed hers, their eyes met, just a flicker, but enough. His were a gray that caught light strangely, storm-touched, carrying a weight she recognized, a man who'd known loss. Later, by the pump-out back, Eli approached where she filled buckets. He kept a respectful distance, hands loose at his sides. You from around here? Clara's heart jumped at being spoken to like she mattered. Still, caution held her voice tight. No. Didn't reckon so, he said softly. His gaze flicked toward the house where the Baron's lantern glowed. You look like someone wishing for another horizon. She gripped the bucket's handle until her knuckles ached. It doesn't matter what I wish. For a long breath, he said, nothing. Then, with quiet finality, it matters to me. The words startled her. No man had spoken like that, not since her father died, not since Samuel's small hand clung to hers. She lowered her eyes, afraid the Baron might be watching. In the days that followed, Eli proved himself with the herd, quiet but capable. He spoke little, yet when his eyes found hers, Clara felt as though he could see straight through the walls she'd built. Once, when Whitfield barked at her for dropping a plate, Eli's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. That restraint gave her courage. Someone else saw. Someone else knew she wasn't invisible. One evening, she carried scraps to the dogs. Eli passed by, pausing. I don't know your story, he murmured, but if you ever need a way out, I'll ride with you. Her throat tightened, the bucket nearly slipping. No one had ever offered her escape. She couldn't answer. Fear of... The Baron was a chain around her tongue, but inside her chest, something long buried stirred like a seed in spring soil. The chance came on a night when the moon was thin and clouds hung heavy, muting the prairie in shadows. Whitfield had drunk himself into a rage, overturning a table and snarling at Clara for spilling a drop of whiskey that never was. His hand clamped her wrist so tight she thought the bone might crack. Remember your place, he growled, breath hot with drink. For the first time, Clara yanked free. Her voice shook, but it rose clear. I will not belong to you. The room froze. Whitfield's face darkened like storm clouds over the plains. His fist lifted, but before it fell, Eli was there. He had stepped in without a word, placing himself between them, tall and still as a tree. His voice was low, steady. You'll back off. Whitfield laughed, though the sound rang hollow. You think you can take what's mine, Drifter? No, Eli said. I think she ain't yours to take. Something wild sparked in Clara then, the courage she had long smothered. While the Baron's eyes burned on Eli, she grabbed her shawl, heart hammering. Eli met her gaze, the smallest nod passing between them like a promise. Minutes later, they were in the stable, breath coming fast. Eli saddled his horse with practiced hands, while Clara clutched the lantern. The prairie stretched endless, both threat and salvation. Where will we go? She whispered. Anywhere he isn't, Eli answered, then softer, Do you trust me? She thought of Samuel's face, of her vow under the moonlight. She thought of Eli's steady eyes that never tried to own her. She nodded. Yes. They rode hard into the dark, hooves drumming against the earth. The wind tore at Clara's hair, fear and freedom mingling in her chest until she could hardly breathe. Behind them, shouts rose, the Baron's men giving chase. Bullets cracked through the night, one striking a rock near Eli's stirrup. Hold on, he called, spurring the horse toward the canyon rim. Clara clung to him, every muscle tight, with terror. The land fell away, jagged rock glinting under starlight. At the last moment, Eli turned sharp into a narrow cut, the walls of the canyon swallowing them whole. The riders behind overshot, their curses fading into distance. The horse slowed, lathered and heaving, and Clara pressed her face to Eli's back, shaking with sobs she had held for too long. He didn't speak, only laid a hand over hers where it gripped his coat. A quiet vow passed between them in that touch. She was no longer alone. They lay low for days in a hidden hollow where the canyon opened into a meadow. Wildflowers tangled among the grass, and a clear stream sang over smooth stones. It felt like another world, untouched by Whitfield's reach. Clara tended the fire, her hands busy with cooking while Eli mended tack or scouted the ridges. In that simple rhythm, she found something she had almost forgotten: peace. One evening, Clara spread a small cloth on the grass and set out cornbread she had baked over coals. Eli sat nearby, watching the sunset flame across the sky. For a long time, they ate in silence until he said, You remind me of spring, Clara May. Even after winter takes near everything, spring comes back. Fierce and tender both. Her cheeks warmed, and she glanced down at the bread in her hands. I don't feel fierce. I feel like someone who's barely held together. You held yourself together when it counted, he said simply. That takes more courage than you know. His words settled into her like roots. For the first time since she was torn from Samuel, she believed she could grow again. She began to plant little signs of hope, seeds from prairie flowers tucked. Near the stream, scraps of cloth sewn into a quilt from her dress hem. A garden, however small, to remind her she was not only surviving, she was making a place. Weeks later, Clara's prayers were answered when Henry, the ranch hand who had once warned her, slipped into town to tell Samuel where she had gone. The boy arrived at their hollow, thin and weary but alive, his cry of Clara splitting her heart wide open. She held him close, whispering promises she could finally keep. Together, the three of them built a cabin with Eli's hands steady, at the saw and Samuel eager with nails. Clara planted herbs by the door, their scent filling the air each morning. They were a family not bound by blood or barter, but by choice. Sometimes, when the wind shifted, Clara thought she could still hear Whitfield's voice carried from the plains, but it no longer held power. She had escaped his grip, and in its place found something stronger: belonging. On a quiet evening, Eli placed a simple carved box in her hands. Inside lay wildflower seeds gathered from their meadow. For the garden you'll grow, he said, so you'll always know this land. Belongs to you as much as it does to me? Clara pressed the seeds to her heart, her eyes bright with tears. In the hush of twilight, Samuel laughing nearby, she finally felt the truth. She was free, loved, and home. If Clara May's courage and heart touched something quiet and true inside your soul, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Out here in the Wild West, love may be hard-won, but it's always worth the fight. Join us for more stories of grit, sacrifice, and hearts that endure against all odds.